everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Fernando Mejia. I'm a program manager for the Azure API Management service. My first time in London, very beautiful city, very beautiful people, so thank you everyone for coming here. So let's get started. We have just 45 minutes. So basically this session is going to be very dynamic. I hope to show some demos of the new features that we have launched for the Azure API Management service. But there's no features or stories that are worth if there's no benefit for you as partners or customers of Azure, or we want to help you make APIs scalable. So that's the benefit of things. So as part of the agenda, we're going to talk about the importance of APIs. Just to be clear, in this session, whenever we talk APIs, it's going to be web APIs, of course, right? We're going to talk about also what we call API-first development. This is like the gold standard where we want every customer and every partner to be capable of doing this. Then what is the journey to get into this API-first development? What are some capabilities that, based on our experience, we recommend you will have if you want to go there? And finally, how our service called Azure API Management can help you to get to that state, okay? So let's get started. Importance of APIs. I believe if you are here, you probably are aware of this benefit. But just to make it real clear and with a real life example, let's talk about, for example, OpenAI, but not thinking about the AI part of or the large language models. So for example, OpenAI is running all of their infrastructure, if you have seen, in Kubernetes clusters, and they're running containers and microservices to expose their large language models, right? So they are doing this cloud-native stack, cloud-native platform infrastructure for their large language models, but actually that innovation is being exposed through APIs, right? The website that we go to, this ChatGPT, it's a website that is calling all the APIs underneath. And they also released a mobile application a couple of weeks ago that's also going to that APIs. And also they exposed this API to third parties, right? So anyone who wants to integrate their own applications into ChatGPT, large language models, you can do it. And basically you can do it through these APIs, right? These REST APIs. So basically APIs are this fabric that allows us to develop our digital experience, and this fabric consists of networking protocols, databases, middlewares, and together we connect all this digital world today, right? Another important thing of APIs is that once you have an API that provides a lot of value, you can start extending this to third parties, right? You can start creating marketplaces, like for example, OpenAI has done, where you can create plugins that can extend the functionality. So you can create all this whole ecosystem with APIs, right? And finally, you can power connected experiences also. Again, multiple types of devices, mobile applications, web applications, any type of applications that can do REST calls or API call. But of course, not everyone is like OpenAI. We still have some customers and ourselves that are running legacy platforms, all the kinds of APIs, SOAP APIs around there. So we still have to take care of those. But they're still providing some value for our companies, right? So now let's talk about API-first development. When we say API-first development, we mean that when you're going to design a new product or experience, you're going to focus on designing the API first, okay? This is actually the way we do things at Azure. Whenever we're going to develop a new service for you, the first thing that we think, okay, how's the API going to look? We call this the ARM API. What's the contract going to look? What are going to be the operations? Is this a post? Is this a get? Is this a put? And we have to go through this process of revision where we improve these APIs, right? After the API is ready, then we start working in the UI, and we start working in the SDKs, the CLIs, and all the other experiences, right? So this is the gold standard that we want everyone to start thinking about, right? Instead of thinking about the data model for your application or the UI experience, think about the API first, okay? So this means that, first we have to define an API contract, okay? We have to maintain this API contract. It's going to have a life cycle. It's going to evolve over time. It's going to have multiple versions. We have to adhere to that contract, and we have to validate that every request that comes is going to be valid to this contract. And finally, this will allow us to have a better integration, right? So this is the main goal, and this is what we want to try to achieve, okay? So how do we do that? Basically, this is a journey. It's not going to be the same for everyone. There are companies probably that are already there. There are others that are in this path, but these are some of the capabilities that we will recommend for you to have before getting into this API first journey, right? So the first thing, being able to discover and reuse your own APIs within your company. securing and especially authenticating and authorizing any API calls coming to you. Being able to see what's happening in all the stack of your APIs, how many requests are you able to handle, how many failures, requests, RPS, latency do you have in your system. Designing and testing APIs. Interoperability with multiple protocols. So for example, let's do a raise of hands. Anyone here maintaining at this moment some SOAP APIs? Okay. Any REST APIs here? Yeah, majority. Okay. Any WebSocket APIs? Nice. GraphQL? Cool, cool. And gRPC APIs? Okay, wow. Nice. You're on top of the spear. Doing gRPC. And of course, governance and security. And here, governance and security, we mean at the whole corporation level, right? Being able to set policies and being able to secure all the APIs that are running within my company, okay? So this is where our service comes, Azure API Management. Please, again, raise up your hand. Who is using Azure API Management at this moment? Excellent. Great. So we have some new features that we want to show for you. And the service is always evolving. There are some features that have come to GA, generally available. There are some features that are completely new that we're going to show to you. And some things that are still there, but probably we're going to refresh it for the people that do not know it, okay? So we're going to take a look into the demo right now so we can start seeing all the things that we can do with Azure API Management, okay? So let's hope, demos are complicated, a lot of moving parts. Let's hope demo gods are with us this day. And basically, we're going to take this application. This is a microservices application running in Kubernetes. And with a static web application, a UI. And basically, we're going to have 4 microservices. We're going to have a microservice that brings data of weather. Flights API brings the data of some flights. Quakes API, earthquakes information. And then we're going to have a data microservices that is going to store all this information into a NoSQL database. In this case, it's going to be MongoDB with Azure Cosmos DB. And then we have some ingress controller running in this Kubernetes cluster, and then a client application calling all of these APIs, okay? So what we're going to do now is that we're going to convert this, let's say, web-first application into an API-first application. We're going to try and convert this into an API platform within our company, right? Not just to serve this web application, but to serve any digital experience that wants to consume this data, okay? So let's get started. And first, we're going to talk about API discovery and reuse, okay? So you can see here, this is my application running. See? I have here my Kubernetes cluster, and I have my microservices running. I have 2 replicas per each web service, and I have these services being exposed here in a Kubernetes cluster in Azure, okay? Now let's take a look at the application. This is the UI. You can see that we can call each microservice completely independently. And the best thing of microservices is that each microservice can scale horizontally based on the needs, right? So I'm going to call the Weather API, Flights API. And then I'm going to render this information, right? So in the case of the flights, I have these flights set up for UK also. So we have some information here. Anyone took a flight to come to this conference? Okay, probably we can find your flight somewhere in here. But yeah, this is our flights information. Earthquakes information, I come from South America, from Chile. You can see that we have a lot of seismic activity, right? And a surprise here, I don't know if I don't have the right data, but you're a very stable country in that sense, right? Weather API also, we have some weather here. Let's see, it's getting a little bit warmer, right? 59 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is our application, right? But now let's get to our APIs, right? And this is the first thing, if we want to make this an API platform, the first thing is we have to have a contract, right? In the case of REST API, those are open API specifications. So for example, I have here my Flights API. You can see I have all these endpoints. I have an endpoint to get the current information, the latest information, to refresh the information. So for example, I can try this out. And this is going directly to the microservices running in Kubernetes, right? Right now, there's no API management in between, and we get all this information, okay? The same for Weather API and the same for Quakes API. We have the same structure, okay? So this is my application, okay? So the first thing is that we're going to do is I have my Azure API Management service created in Azure, right? I'm going to start onboarding these APIs to Azure, okay? Very quickly. I just go here to Open API. I expose my Open API schema. Let's start with flights. Okay. I'm going to put it here, flights API. Okay, create. Okay. So for example, the Kubernetes API does not have HTTPS, sorry, but I can expose HTTPS on the front, right? So this is the URL of my API, but now I will call this through API management with HTTPS. And now I can expose this through a concept in API management called products. So I can start bundling these APIs for different users within my company. If you're going to try it out, you can just use Starter. If you're going to use it for production, you can use Unlimited, right? Here I can also do the same for Weather API. For example, I just bring here the Open API specification, Weather API. This is very basic stuff. I know that you already know this, but we're going to get into more stuff pretty soon, so just bear with me. Okay, so I'm also going to put this into multiple products here. Okay. And now I can call these APIs through my API gateway, right? So I can go here and I can go to latest. And now you can see if I want to call this API, I need to pass some kind of key, right? A subscription key. So I call this API. And now I have added a basic security, right? It's just a key in a header, but now I get this information, okay? But also, you know, I now can enable my developers to go to this that we call developer portal. So now, for example, my developers, I can give them access to this portal, right? And they can test the APIs from this portal, right? They can see the documentation, they can see what APIs they have access, what products, and the limitations of these products. So developer portal, very basic stuff, we already know this, but this allows us to expose our APIs to these developers, right? But now we have a new service, and this is a completely new service that it's also going to allow us to share these APIs and to allow the reusability of these APIs across an organization. And this is a completely new service, and this is going to be called API Center, okay? So API Center is going to run on parallel with API Management. It's going to be a different service. You need to provision it in the Azure portal. What's the main difference? Well, what's the difference with the developer portal? Developer portal is a one-to-one relationship with API Management. Every time you deploy one API Management, you get one developer portal. API Center is a one-to-many, one API Center to many API managements. So in this API Center, you can have all the schemas of all your APIs. You can have all the environments in which those APIs are running, the actual implementation, and also you can have the metadata of those APIs, okay? So for example, if I have two APIs that give me back a property called country, and this is a string, I can start mapping all these properties across multiple APIs, and then I can start querying, and I can say, you know, give me all the APIs that have the property country. And I can see if there are some differences and changes in there. And also, I can upload here APIs, for example. You will see some errors here, yeah, because this is in private preview. So don't freak out. This is by design. But you can see here, you can register any type of API. Right now, it's more like a catalog thing. So if you have GraphQL APIs, WebSocket APIs, gRPC APIs, you will be able to register them here. And also, you can register if those APIs are running in other API management solutions like MuleSoft, AWS API Gateway, or APG. You can also register those environments here, right? So it's not tied to an API management. And we will manage concepts like API specification. This specification could point to multiple implementations. We could have one running in Kubernetes, like I have right now. We could have another one running Azure Functions. And we also have this concept called environments, which could point to different API gateway solutions, okay? So it's a way to map all the APIs that you have in a single place, and you can start reusing it for another type of user, which is not necessarily a developer, okay? So this is the API Center and the developer portal that will help you to do API discovery and reuse, yeah? Of course, another important part is authentication and authorization, being able to lock down your APIs, yeah, in a secure way. And for this, we have, of course, what we call policies. And here now we have some things that could help you out, right? So for example, once I have my APIs here, I can come here. And at the API gateway, I can add some business logic here and change the behavior of the API, right? If you're familiar with this, basically you can do this with something that we call a policy. And nowadays, this is very more easily to do because we have integration with GitHub Copilot. Anyone here familiar with GitHub Copilot? Yeah, so GitHub Copilot can recommend code for you. And basically, this is code that we write inside API management. So now this code can become very complex, but now Copilot can recommend it to you. So for example, we just have to put here, validate jot. And you can see GitHub Copilot is going to automatically create this template for me for doing a jot validation, okay? But there's another type of Copilot available right now, and this is more exciting because it gives more explanation of what that code is going to do, and this is called GitHub Copilot X. So for example, we can tell, Copilot X, give me a jot policy to secure my APIs with a jot token, or give me an API management, or give me a policy to replace a string of text, or to do some caching and things like that, right? So I can just tell Copilot what I need to do, and it understands Azure API management policies, is going to give me a sample that I can use, yeah? And I can put into my code. So there's no need to be an expert on Azure API management policies now. You can rely on this kind of tools, yeah? But you always have to verify them, right? It's not going to be exactly what you need. In this case, I have my own here, so I'm going to copy paste, yeah? But for example, I can come here. I'm going to create a new version, just not to add any complex. So I'm going to put it with jot, okay? Okay, and in this version, I'm going to add this policy, okay? So I'm going to add in the inbound. So this means that basically when a call comes to API management, I will require a jot, and this jot needs to be signed with this signature, right? In an ideal world, this jot needs to be signed by an authorization server like Azure AD. We also support if you have Ping, Okta, Auth0, any provider that supports the OAuth 2.0 or OIDC standard, we can support it. So that's the ideal solution. So now when we try calling this API, we will need to pass a better token, yeah? Because we're adding a new layer of security, right? So we're going to come here to latest. We need to pass a subscription key. But now we have to pass a header here, authorization, better. And I have here a token, yeah? That's been signed with that signature, and it's a valid jot, okay? Oh, I don't need this. Okay, so I'm going to call the API. You see, if I change this token, basically this is going to give me an error, right? So if I add more text here, this is an invalid token. Yeah. And here we're securing it at runtime, right? We can protect through multiple ways with IPs, IP filter, with gateway. We can ask for certificates, and many combination of security mechanism at the gateway, right? So we can authenticate and authorize just the people or the applications that you want to authenticate and authorize, right? Another important part is being able to see what's happening at the API management gateway in multiple levels, right? So for example, how much latency, when I do a call to API management and then goes to the microservices, how much latency is each step adding, right? Or for example, how much traffic am I able to handle in given certain conditions, right? So this is very important. So here, for example, we can use multiple capabilities here. One feature is one that we call tracing. So for example, we can add here a header that is called OCP APIM trace. Basically, we're telling, please give me a trace if this equals true. Okay, and then we're going to do a call here. I have to delete this part. Okay, so I'm going to send a trace again. I just need to enable tracing for this key. Yeah. So now, for example, a change here is that tracing is now disabled by default. You have to enable it because tracing is going to reveal a lot of information. So now you have to come here to the keys and you have to allow tracing. Okay. So this is also a change that we made for security. So now we can here copy the keys. Okay, go to APIs. Okay, I'm going to call the original test. Going to pass here, and we need to specify this header. OCP. I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to put here true because I want that tracing. And we're going to do a call. Oh, you need to, yeah, you're right. Thank you. Authorization. Better. Going to put the token. Okay. Now let's go to trace. What am I missing here? True.
Why don't you just press the trace button instead test? So there's a trace and there's a test and a trace button in the entrance, right?
This is the trace button, yeah? Yeah, no worries. I'm going to put the exact key here. So I'm going to put the key, subscription key. There you go. Yeah, so now this is what I was saying. Tracing is disabled by default now because this reveals a lot of information, so now you have to enable it. So here, for example, you can get exactly what's happening at the API Management Gateway. You get the request. This request is being inspected. Then all the policies are going to be applied. So for example, you can see how much latency is each policy going to add to your call. So for example, validate jot is going to add 0.154 millisecond. And then you get exactly how much the backend is going to take to respond, right? So you get the whole information here, okay? But also another thing is an integration that we have with application insights. So you can integrate your API management with application insights, and you get this live view. So you can see here that, all the errors that I was getting are being shown here, and the exceptions, jot not present, or, unable to decode jot, everything is going to show up here, right? So this is going to show you a live behavior of what's happening with your API management, okay? We're going to come back to this when we do some load testing, so we'll be able to see what happens when we do some load here, okay? So now, API testing and design. This is another capability that we recommend you build for your API first journey. And here we have something that we want to show to you that normally goes, that is not very used to much, right? And this is a service that we call Azure Load Testing, okay? So Azure Load Testing is a service based on JMeter, where you can pass something that we call a JMeter script, and you can simulate thousands of users coming to your website, but also you can simulate thousands of users coming to your APIs, okay? So this is very important, doing load testing of your APIs, because if you're expecting a huge number of users, some of the problems that we see is wrong sizing of your infrastructure, right? And this could be wrong sizing of your database, wrong sizing of your APIs, and also wrong sizing of your API management, right? So with tools like this, you can simulate this amount of traffic, and you can see how everything behaves or how everything breaks, actually, right? Which is better to do it before than when the customer comes, right? So for example, you can come here and you can do things like this. For example, you can specify what API management you want to call, what protocol, what API. So for example, here we can change to flights API. And we're going to call one of the operations here. So we're going to go here. And let's go flights API. Or we're going to do weather because this doesn't have a JOT token. So we're going to call latest. Okay. So we can come here and we can call latest. Weather API. We pass a subscription key. And we can simulate this amount of users. In this case, I'm not sending too much users. I'm just sending 10 users. But they will be constantly hitting my API. And you can get information like this, for example. With 10 users during 2 minutes, I was able to get 132 requests per second of my APIs, right? And with a latency of 67 milliseconds. So what happens if I do 1,000, right? What happens if I do 2,000? What happens if I do 3,000, right? So this is going to give you real data of how exactly your APIs are going to behave under certain amount of stress, okay? So this is really useful, and I recommend you to stress, the hell out of your APIs, break them out, and see what layers do you need to scale, and how do you need to scale them out, okay? So this is really useful, it's Azure Load Testing. We provision all the infrastructure for you. We do all this running, this test for you, and you can also going to be able to see all this traffic coming to Azure Application Insights. So you can see here the traffic is coming. 100, 150 calls per second. And this, Azure Load Testing is going to start throwing users to my API. And I can see the actual latency, the actual behavior of my own implementation, right? If I have a JOT policy, and if I'm asking for a certificate, and if I'm asking for a subscription key, if I do this with multiple conditions, if I'm sending 3 megabytes of payload, what's going to be the behavior of those APIs, right? So this is also that we recommend a lot. It's part of Azure now, the Azure portfolio. You can also put here, for example, you can link it with the application insights metrics now, and you can see, you can compare both metrics together, okay? So let's see. So this is very important. Another thing, about testing and designing is that now we have this thing that we call Postman integration. So you come here, once you bring your APIs to Azure API Management, anyone using here Postman for testing? Okay, so yeah, glad we did this then. So you can export your API management entities and configuration to Postman, a Postman collection. You can choose your workspace here. Yeah. And there you go. You just have to specify here in order to start doing calls. There will be a parameter here, the API key, the subscription key, and you will be able to start doing calls to your API management directly through Postman. So you have all the operations here, and you can start doing multiple calls. Postman just released also an extension for VS Code. So we have this integration, all there for you. Okay, so that's API testing and design. And now we get with multiple protocols of APIs, right? We have different types of APIs, Some companies, they have a mix, like, for example, 40% of SOAP APIs and 60% of REST APIs. Other ones just have REST API, but there are these new protocols coming, right? Like WebSocket for bidirectional communication, GraphQL, single endpoint, I can ask for the data that I need. And probably there will be more coming, right? Like OData, we're going to have a session after this with SAP. Then we're going to talk about this. So what can we do here, right? So in this case, we're going to show you something that is very interesting. That was, I think we shared this last year. But it's basically something that we call, this has come GA, generally available, so you can try it right now. So this is called synthetic GraphQL, okay? So let's suppose you have SOAP APIs and you have REST APIs. So now, if you bring those APIs to API Management can convert those REST and SOAP APIs to GraphQL, okay? If you have GraphQL implementations, you can also bring those to API Management, but if you don't, you can now pretend that you have GraphQL applications, okay? So for example, you can come here and let's say, we're going to do an API that is going to expose data from both flights and weather API, right? But I don't have an actual GraphQL implementation behind that. So I'm going to put here synthetic GraphQL. The only thing this is going to ask me, okay, what's the schema of your API, okay? And then again, we come back to the API contract, okay? This is really important. API contract, again, is going to be this, set the expectations for clients and servers. So that's the only thing that you need to define, an API contract. So I have here this API contract for GraphQL. Okay, and I'm going to put it flights, weather, GQL, okay? If you're not familiar with the GraphQL schema, it's basically you're going to define a set of values, set of properties that you're going to expose, and then what queries are you going to answer, yeah? GraphQL is basically a query language for your APIs. The main advantage of GraphQL over REST is that you have just a single endpoint, and this endpoint can give you data of multiple entities, right? So in a standard, let's say, for example, the service tracker UI, when I come here, I need to do 3 calls to 3 different endpoints, right? With GraphQL, with this GraphQL API, I could just do 1 call to one endpoint, and I could tell it, bring me the data of the flights, bring me the data of the earthquakes, and also the data of the temperature in a single call. So that's the main advantage of GraphQL. So for example, we're going to go here, and we're going to say, you know, this GraphQL endpoint is going to answer information of flights and information of weather, okay? But, you know, we have this concept called resolvers. So when someone asks for information of the flights, yeah, someone asks for flights, go and get this data from this REST endpoint, okay? So I'm going to put here the REST endpoint of the flights API. Okay. So this is my flight API. And this is what we call resolvers. And this is the translation part. When someone comes to API management with GraphQL query for flights, API management will translate this query to a REST call, or it could be a SOAP call, or any HTTP call to typical REST endpoint, okay? So this is the translation that we're going to do. So we create this resolver. Let's see what I'm missing. I think this is like this. Get. And I also need to add another for weather. When someone asks information about this, okay, resolve this query and go to our weather API, okay? So I'm going to put this here. Okay. And now, what I'm going to do is that, you know, I'm going to, instead of doing a REST call, I'm going to do a GraphQL call. So I'm going to ask for, bring me all the flights with the country and flight number. And this is going to start creating a GraphQL query. Yeah, you can see this is my GraphQL query to the right. But also now bring me information of the weather. I can say, bring me also the country and the temperature, okay? So this is what my API management is going to receive, but underneath the hood, we're going to call these REST endpoints, okay? So again, we're going to expose GraphQL, but it's pretend, right? You can pretend you have GraphQL. So now we're going to, products, we're going to try it out. And you can see here, I got the response, and we have information coming from flights. But if we go down, or too many flights, yeah. Here, you can see that we now also have information about the weather in a single API call, okay? So this is synthetic GraphQL. It's just GA right now. So again, you can pretend you have GraphQL when in reality you just have REST or SOAP endpoints, right? And this goes beyond. You can do some API composition. You can do some API aggregation, start exposing GraphQL for some use cases, modernize your APIs. No need to have GraphQL underneath. But if you do have GraphQL, you can also bring those with you, okay? So that's synthetic GraphQL, okay? So with that, and the last one is governance, compliance, and security, but this is more at, again, organizational scale. And for this, we have a feature that we just released also, a couple of weeks ago that is called Defender for APIs, okay? So Defender, if you're familiar in Azure, there's this solution called Defender for Cloud for Azure. It first started protecting your VMs. If you were missing some patches, it will recommend it. Then start protecting your container image, your Kubernetes cluster, your applications. And now it's getting to another level. It's going to protect your APIs. So again, if you bring your APIs to API management can now integrate with Defender, and you can say, Defender, please protect all of these endpoints that I have, like get flights, get weather, or get earthquake information. And Defender is going to list all of your APIs, and it's going to tell you, okay, you have some APIs that don't have any authentication or authorization mechanism. You have some APIs that have not been called in the last 30, 60 days. Probably you should turn them off or delete them. No one is calling them. Or you have some APIs that are exposing personal data, like in America, social security number or personal information identifier. So you can have a single pane of view at a security level of all your API endpoints. You can also query your APIs, and you can say, hey, Defender, bring me all my endpoints that are not secure, or bring me all my endpoints that have not been called in the last 60 days. And finally, we have some machine learning models that are going to compare the traffic of your API endpoints with top 10 OWASP vulnerabilities and detect if there is any cross-scripting vulnerability, SQL injection, or something like that going on with your API endpoints, okay? So this is also available for you to test, and this will be, again, security, but at a whole organization level. And finally, we also have some other features, just one that we call Azure authorizations that's going GA. And this is for another kind of APIs. If you have third-party APIs in your organization, use things like Salesforce, GitHub, Teams, you can put those behind API management, and API management can handle all the authentication using OAuth 2, can store those tokens, refresh them for you, secure them for you, and there's no need to handle that complex flows with policies or send requests. We can handle those for you. And finally, API Center, it's our new service. It's going to run on par with Azure API Management. We just showed you. It's for a different kind of users. It's for reusing your APIs within your organization. Try it out. This is in private preview. These presentations are going to be available for you, so the links will be there. You can start trying the service. API Center, this is completely new. And basically, to finish these presentations, as we mentioned, APIs are the fabric that connect all of our digital experiences, right? The pipelines, that connect all of our data right now. They're very important APIs. API-first development is this model in which we focus on the API first, on the API contract. We validate this. And then once this contract is good enough, we can start building more experiences on top of those. And API management is the service that we have within Azure that can allow you to run this at scale and allow you to modernize your APIs and help you in all the life cycle stages of your APIs, testing, development, securing, governance, and everything that we saw. So thank you very much. That's everything I have for you. So if you have any questions, I think we have some time, right? We have some time, or? See, or probably not. Probably not. Okay, well, I'll be back there. Thank you very much.